In part 4, we're going to introduce enemies. First, we're going to add a quick way to restart our game. We've done this before. Instead of putting it on a controller, right now we're just going to put it on player. We're going to add event, key pressed, letters, R, so that anytime you press R, we'll restart the game. This is for debugging only, and you should be able to write this code yourself. So hopefully you're ahead of me, and you have game restart. Next, we're going to add 4 enemy sprites. We won't need player for a while, so I'm going to go ahead and close it. We'll open sprites. We have 1 enemy sprite, so we're going to first open that and change its sprite. We'll go to import, move to our assets folder, and open enemy. You'll notice that our enemy is very similar to our player. Same size, 48 by 48, has middle center for its origin, and we're going to change his hitbox to be very similar also. So change your hitbox to manual and drag it until it just covers his body and about the center of his eyes, about the same as we did with player. Then we're going to create 3 more enemies: enemy R, enemy A, and enemy D. You should be able to do this. We're not changing their origins. We're not messing with their hitbox. Just create those 3 enemies: enemy R, enemy A, and enemy D, using the sprites for enemy R, A, and D. Again, you should be able to do that. So I'm not going to talk you through it. I'm just going to do it very quickly. So I have my 4 enemy sprites, and this last one that I added, enemy D, obviously is for when our enemy is down. And we do need to change a few things on this particular sprite. First, we're going to change his origin. I want the origin set at 2140, which puts the origin down kind of behind him where he would be landing on the ground. Second, we want to change his hitbox. This is the only enemy that is not going to share the same hitbox as the regular enemy. We're going to bring it down so that it is about here, but raised a couple of pixels off the bottom. So not all the way down to the bottom, but raised a couple of pixels. Next, we're going to duplicate player. So I'm done with my sprites. I'm going to close my sprites so I don't mess around with those. Open my objects. I'm going to right-click on player and duplicate this player object. Now that's going to do, and we're going to rename it obj_enemy. And that's going to do a number of things. One, it has all of the movement already built in because we have that big long step event that we have all of this code in. And we're sharing a lot of that code between player and enemy. So we're going to start with more code than we need, then we're going to remove what we don't need. one thing we don't want is this R being coded in more than one place. So the first thing you need to delete is the key press R. Right click, all the way at the bottom, delete. Say yes. The next thing, notice that we're using our player's sprite. Well, this is the enemy. We need to make sure you change the player sprite to enemy sprite. Make sure that we have that enemy sprite. And our collision mask is not going to be like player. It's going to be the same as enemy, so that all of our enemies have the same collision mask, regardless of which sprite we choose. Next, we're going to work on the step event. The step event code is quite complicated, but I hope that you understand every bit of it. We've talked about it. We've coded it all together. All of your code should match mine exactly. I hope your names match mine because they're supposed to. And if they don't, you really need to go back through and fix your code. Make sure that your code is well commented, like my code is. And you'll see the reason for that as we update this code for enemy. It makes it so much easier to go to specific code if it is well commented. Okay, so remember that when you are copying and pasting code, which we essentially did because we duplicated it, so all of this code is identical to our player, but we're in our enemy, make sure that you update everything, including comments. So we're no longer using this to control player, we are using it to control enemy movement. We won't need these variables for movement because movement is going to be controlled in a different way. So we're going to come down all the way through line 11, HSP equals move times walk speed. All of that we're going to delete. So the first line in this step event is VSP equals VSP plus gravity. We're also going to delete the if statement that deals with the jump key. So our enemy is not going to be jumping. So we're going to get rid of all of that that has to do with jumping. So I'm going to delete everything from my current line 4 through line 7. If you're not on the same lines with me, you might want to get your code on the same lines with me. It just will make it easier. But basically, I'm deleting everything that has to do with jumping. And again, your comments right here that says, can I jump? Okay, well, no, you can't because you're an enemy. That will help you get into the right location. So I get rid of all of my jump. Then down a little lower where it says decide which sprite to use. When we're deciding which sprite to use, we need to be using enemy sprites, not player sprites. But the code is going to be the same. So we're just going to replace player with enemy. Every place you see player, you're going to remove that and write enemy. Player A becomes enemy A. Player R becomes enemy R. And player becomes enemy. So there were 3 locations that I changed. Make sure that you update all 3 of those. Next, we're going to go to our room, open level 1, and we're going to create another layer. This layer will be called enemies, and we want it to be placed under player. So I'm going to select walls. If you have already created your layer before selecting walls, just drag it to the right location. But make sure that you change it so that the name is enemies. Now I have a kind of rough flooring plan here. So I'm going to straighten that out a little bit now that we're dealing with our enemies. I'm just going to select my walls layer. I'm going to choose this and move it up. And I'm going to choose that and move it down. And I'm just going to make this, whoops, didn't mean to do that. I'm just going to make this flat. That is probably too low. I'm probably not going to be able to walk under it. So if I select it and then shift select and hope I count, yes, I did. I managed to get the right platform collection. And if you've created your walls continuously, you'll usually be able to do that. If not, you could always select them individually. I'm going to just get rid of these because they look like two teeth hanging down there. Okay, so it's mostly flat, and I'm good with that. Now we're going to add some enemies. So we'll go back to the enemies layer. Make sure you're on the enemies layer when you're adding enemies. And we're just going to select an enemy object and drag a few into our scene. And it doesn't really matter where we put them. Okay. Now our enemies also are going to be affected by gravity, so we place them in the air and they are going to fall down, and then eventually they're going to move on their own. So we've got some enemies placed here. We're good with where they are for now. I'm going to run my game. And now you can see that effect of gravity by just hitting the R key and restarting your game. So you can see how gravity is making things fall. Again, changing the number for the gravity will make them fall faster or slower. So, but I like this rate, so I'm going to leave it at that. And I would like to make sure that this is all working, that your enemies are the right color, that your player is green, that you've placed a few, that you have your floor relatively flat. So when you get to this point, please raise your hand so I can come around and check you off of my list. Okay, so now we'll close this, and we're going to go back to our enemy object, and we're going to the create event. And we won't need the jump speed because our enemy is not going to jump, but we will need hit points. So we're going to set our hit points to 4. That will determine their health. And we're going to set flash to 0. And this is going to be used when they are injured. So next we'll open, by the way, don't worry about these little yellow cautions. It's just telling you that that variable has only been referenced once. Well, yeah, that's because we just declared it. We haven't used it yet, so we're not going to worry about that. We're going to our ink object. And in the ink object, we're going to add a collision with enemy. So in our collision with enemy, I'm just going to write some code, and you should understand what it means at this point. with other. Other has to be in parentheses. We have our curly braces, HP minus minus, flash equals 3. Outside of those curly braces, we have instance destroy. You should be able to look at this code and tell me exactly what it does. Therefore, I want you to comment it. Your code must be well commented. That means you need to update these first 2 lines of comment. Tell me what other means. What does other represent? What does HP minus minus do? What does flash equals 3 do? And what does this last line, instance destroy, do? You must have comments in all 6 of these places. The initial comment here, an overall comment there. What does other do? What does HP minus minus mean? What does flash equals 3 do? And what does this instance destroy do? I expect this to be commented, well commented, and you will lose major points if you do not do that. Okay, so that's all we're going to do with enemy for a while. So I'm just going to go ahead and close it. Remember, it doesn't really matter whether things are opened or closed in your workspace. I just try to keep mine a little bit cleaner. I have a tendency to get it quite cluttered. We're done with objects for a moment. We're going to go down to this new folder called shaders, just above sounds. It's called shaders. Now, we've not used a shader, so this will be absolutely new. So we'll go through it a little bit slow, and I'll try to explain things to you. We're going to right-click on shaders and create a new shader. We're going to call this sh underscore, that's our prefix, yellow, and when we call it sh yellow over here in the asset browser, we will get 2 tabs. We get sh yellow vsh and .fsh. Now, if you look at the code for shaders, it's complicated and difficult to understand. Got this stuff in all caps, which we've not been doing, so that's different. There is some commenting used, but it's not real helpful, except we have X, Y, Z. Okay, X and Y, we understand that location. Z is a 3-dimension, so that's a 3-dimensional object, which is interesting. RGBA, that's red, green, blue, alpha. That's color, pretty obvious by its name. UV, well, that's texture, and we're not going to worry about that. And actually, we're not going to change anything in this VSH tab. So I want you to click on the FSH tab. So we have SH for shader. Our shader is yellow, and it's .FSH. That's the tab we're going to work in. So let's look at this code. We have a comment block that just says this is a simple pass-through fragment shader. We have a couple of variables that are declared. We're not going to mess with those. We're just going to leave those exactly as they are. And we have this interesting statement called void main. Now, void main, that means that this is a method inside of this code, which I know you don't exactly understand, but if you get into any in-depth programming, you'll eventually learn about main methods. Main methods are methods that are run kind of like a create event, but not exactly. Regardless, inside of there, we have 1 line of code. So we're going to click at the end of that 1 line of code, and we're going to add a second line. We're going to type GL underscore frag color equals VEC4, that's for a vector 4. Notice it is a keyword, in a parenthesis, and these numbers, 1.0, comma, space, 0.9, comma, space, 0, comma, space, GL underscore capital F frag color. And we'll just take that from the top right there. GL underscore frag color. Notice it's green. That means it's a built-in variable. And then we'll do a dot A. Dot A is the alpha. Close our parentheses, end with a semicolon. Okay, so let's look at this code. So we're creating a color, BEC4. Our color is R, G, B, and alpha. Okay, let me put a comment above this. Comments typically go above the code that they're dealing with or at the end. So we're going to show that we have full red, almost full green, no blue. That's what these first three parameters mean. This is R, G, and B. We have full red, 1 is full, almost full green, 0.9, and 0 blue. Well, if you mix red and green, you get yellow. So we have created a yellow color. So this frag color is yellow. So notice that the two variables have the same name. Here, we're setting it to have a specific texture, and then we're affecting its color. And other than that, we're not going to worry about what this shader does. Just want you to know that what we've created right here is the color yellow. So this shader is going to create the color yellow, FSH, yellow. And we can go ahead and close that out. We won't need to deal with that shader anymore because that's really all we're going to do with it. We aren't going to worry about whether or not we understand it completely. We're just going to leave it at that. So let's go back to our enemy object. And we're going to add a draw event. Again, just draw, generic draw event. And in this draw event, we're going to set our shader using shader underscore set to that SH yellow that we created. We're going to draw ourselves. Remember, that's necessary if you want to see the sprite of the object you're putting this draw event into, and we do want to see our enemy. And we're going to reset the shader using shader reset. So first we're going to change our shader to yellow, and then we're going to draw our enemy, and then we're going to reset the shader. So let's run it and see what that does. Now our enemies are fully yellow. Well, that's interesting, but probably not really what we wanted. So let's see what we would need to do. So what I want to do in my description, I want to draw the enemy yellow when hit. That's what I really want this draw event to do. But otherwise, we'll draw them normal. So first, we're going to draw a normal, unless they are hit. We want them to be drawn normal, so we're going to take that line out and just have draw self. Then we're going to decide if they are hit. So if flash is greater than 0, that's what we're using flash for. If flash is greater than 0, then we have been hit. And inside of here, we are going to count down to 0 using flash minus minus. Remember that minus minus subtracts 1 from the variable, so we're counting down to 0. Now remember back here in our ink object, when we collide with the enemy, we set our flash to 3. So that was a variable inside of our enemy that we set to 3. Okay, so here our if flash greater than 0. When flash is 3, that's how we know we've been hit. That's what we're using that flash variable for. Then we're going to count that flash variable down 1 every time we come in here. Now remember, a draw event is like a step event. It fires 60 times every second. So 60 times every second, we're going to come in here. Flash is greater than 0, yes, countdown. Flash is greater than 0, 2, countdown. Make it 1, countdown. Make it 0, flash 0 is not greater than 0, so we'll stop coming in here. So we're going to come into this if loop 3 times when flash is equal to 3. 3, 2, 1, and then we'll stop. So we're just counting that down to 0. Then we're going to use our shader to make the sprite yellow. And that happens to be what I'm holding in my copy and paste. So we have our shader set yellow. That's what makes it yellow. Now it's not going to change the color of our enemy unless we redraw him. So we're going to copy and paste the draw self there. And then underneath of that, we're going to reset our shader. Now, the reason we reset the shader is so that we don't accidentally draw anything else yellow. So this is the only yellow that we want. We want our enemy to be drawn yellow, and we only want that to be done while we're coming in this if block. Now we're going to need a new object. So we're going to right click and create an object and call it obj underscore down. And for this object, we're going to use our enemy down. And this object is going to be used when our enemy has been hit enough that he has lost all of his hit points and he's down for the count. We're going to add a step event, just a normal step event. And in this step event, we're going to mostly grab this code from code that is already written. So the step event for our enemy down is going to be very similar to the step event for our enemy. So we're going to go into our enemy's step event, and we're going to copy from this first line, VSP equals, all the way through the vertical collision right here, y plus equals VSP. So we're getting from VSP the if for the horizontal collision, the if for the vertical collision, also that setting X and Y, all of that. We want to copy it, don't cut it. So I'm going to copy it using Control C. I'm going to come to my enemy down and delete that and print, and make sure that you change that description. What we're doing here is Control down movement. So this is controlling our enemy's down movement. So right now, this variable, VSP, GRV, and HSP, those three variables really don't make any sense to this object because those variables were declared in our enemy, but they've not been declared in our enemy down. So if we ran this, we would end up with an error eventually when we created an enemy down. Let me just show you. So I'm going to go to my room. I'm going to pull over an OBJ down right here, and I'm going to go ahead and run it. And we've gotten this error message saying object down VSP, not set before reading it. You need to get used to seeing that error message, not set before reading it. Not set before reading it means that variable has never been declared. I'm going to remove him from here because we don't really want him there. And we'll go back to our enemy down object. So we've got those variables. They have not been declared. So we're going to declare them. Variables should always be declared in a create event. So we're going to go to our create event. We're going to set up variables. And the variables we need will be HSP. We'll set that to 3. VSP, we're going to set to -4. Talk about that. We need gravity, and we'll set that to 0.3. Again, remember that has to be a decimal, not a whole number. We're going to add another variable called done. We'll set that to 0. And we're going to set our image speed to 0. And you should know what this does. So I'm going to write the question, what does this do? But you need to write a comment right here telling what that does. I will want you to tell me exactly what that image speed equals 0 does. You need to know what that's going to do. That will eventually be a test question. So make sure that you know what that does. Now, VSP equals 0. This is actually going to move the instance down. When we change the Y value, by adding, we move down. And by subtracting, we move up. I know it's a little confusing. It's kind of hard to remember, but it is the way all programming languages work. So we just, as a programmer, have to accept it and get used to it. So now we're going to go back into the step event and update that a little bit. So in our step event, we're going to go to the very top. So I'm going to go to the end of my comment and hit enter so that I can move to the top. And I'm going to write if done equal 0. So this if statement is only going to fire when done equals 0. which we've actually set done equal to 0 in our create event. We'll talk more about this and it'll make sense in just a few minutes. Now, all of this code that's here, I want this to be inside of my if statement. And down here at the bottom, it's reminding you that, you know what, we probably need a curly brace here, which we do. But first, I want all of this to be indented. So I'm selecting all of that code that's inside of the if, that's after the if curly brace, and I'm just going to hit tab. And that will indent it one layer. I'm going to take that blank line out. And at the bottom, I'm going to put my closed curly brace so that, make this a little bigger, you can see all of it. We have if done equals 0, all of this stuff needs to happen, but only if done equals 0. So in this step event, this will only run when done equals 0. Now we're going to add a draw event, just a regular draw event. And this is going to draw our painted enemy down. So we're going to set our shader to yellow. We're going to draw ourselves. And then we're going to reset the shader. Remember, you need to always reset your shader as soon as you're done using it. Now the shader is actually used by every object. That's why it's important that you change it to yellow, use it, and reset it. Otherwise, you're going to be drawing a lot of things yellow that you really don't want to be yellow. So let's just go back to our room and check out this enemy down. So we're just going to drag some enemy down. Notice that he is not yellow. He's whatever, red looks like our enemy. I'm going to place him up here. So I'm going to place this one so that it looks like he's going to fall down onto that platform. He should fall onto that platform. This guy should fall all the way down there when the gravity takes a hold of them. Oh, well, that didn't work out exactly as I thought. Let's look at that again. So he's moving to the right until he runs into something. That one ran into another enemy, which is interesting, and all of those ran into the wall. They also don't fall straight down. They kind of jump over a little bit. Interesting. Okay. So when we hit our enemy, he's going to jump a little bit and arc because we've hit him. So he's falling down and he is moving at the moment. So now we're going to go back to our enemy, not the enemy down, but just our enemy. And we're going to add a new begin step. So we're going to add a step, but this will be a begin step. So we have a regular step in our enemy, and that's controlling enemy movement. But the begin step is going to fire before that. So remember, begin step fires first, then a regular step, then an end step. We have a regular step. We're going to add this begin step before it. So before we deal with our enemy's movement, we're going to check for no HP. we're going to do that with an if condition. If HP is less than or equal to 0. Now, the reason we're not using equal to 0 is because sometimes things happen so quickly that our HP actually falls to negative before this event would notice. So we just want to look for either 0 health or something below 0 health, less than or equal to 0. I would like for you to keep your code nicely spaced. So I've got a space around the less than or equal to in front and behind, but you cannot have a space between those two symbols, because although it takes two symbols to write this, this is actually considered a single operator. Now, inside of my if block, I'm going to create an instance create, and I'm going to create it on a specific layer. We've done this before with our power-up in Breakthrough. We're going to create it at the point that we happen to be using just XY. The layer we're going to put it on will be enemies. That's the layer that our enemies start on, and this is going to be our enemy down, so it's still an enemy, should still be on the same layer. And the object that we're creating, obj_down. Let me make this bigger so we can see it. So we have this is my level 1 room editor. We have this level or layer called enemies, and on that enemies layer, we're going to create a down object, an enemy down, at that same XY location that this current enemy is located. For the next line, we are going to destroy our enemy. And if you can't remember what that is, you can look down the drop-down list and, oh yeah, and instance destroy. That's what we want. And we want that parameter list to be empty, because what we're destroying is this enemy object. We're going to destroy the current enemy object, replacing it with an enemy down, drawing the enemy down and destroying the current enemy. So now we're going to go back to our room, and we're going to get rid of all of these enemy down objects that we added, because we don't really want them to be there until we have an enemy that is down. And we'll run our game. So remember, we can shoot by pointing our mouse and clicking our mouse button, and we need to be able to catch the enemy. I can't seem to get that one. Okay, there's 1, 2, 3, 4 hits, and he's down. Oh, and look at him floating away. Well, okay, well, the 4 hits business works. So if I jump and shoot, I can't quite jump high enough. So I would come this way and look back. Whoops, maybe I need to be above him. Let's see if I can catch him here. 2, 3, and 4, and he's down. Now he's always coming toward me, and that's a little strange, because if I shoot him from the left, he should go to the left. Not sure we're going to do anything about that, but okay, so the whole shooting business is working, and we're getting there. When our enemy goes down, we don't want him to slide all the way around the room. So what I want to do is I want to end his movement when he hits the wall. So when we shoot an enemy and he's standing on a wall, he's going to hop up a little bit and then come down. And I want to have him stop when he comes back down. So let's look at what that would look like. We're going to go into enemy down. We're going into our step event, and we're looking for vertical collision. Vertical collision is when he hits the floor. Okay, Horizontal collision is when he runs into the side of a wall. Vertical collision is when he runs into the top of the wall, when he hits the top of the wall. So we're going to add some code into this if, which means we will now need curly braces. So I've got curly braces around here. So I want to stop my vertical speed. That's true. I also want to remember this is a step event, which fires 60 times every second. So we're coming into this if condition 60 times a second, as long as done is equal to 0. So I want to stop coming in here. I don't want it to move anymore. So I'm going to set done equal to any other number. I'm just going to choose 1 and set done equal to 1. Now also remember that our enemy D sprite has 2 images. So if I look at this, the first one, he's facing me and his legs are kind of up, so he's kind of in the air. And the second one, he's fallen down, he's facing away, and his legs are down, he's down for the count. Okay, so I would also like, back in my enemy down, in addition to not coming in here anymore, I want to make sure that the second frame of the sprite is what's showing. So I'm going to change this to image index equal to 1. And that will show the second frame of the sprite. Okay, so now when we hit the floor, wherever we hit, we're going to stop our vertical movement. That's what keeps us from going through the floor. We're going to change done to 1. That will keep us from coming back into here a second, the next. We're going to change done to 1. That will keep us from coming back into this if block. And we're going to show our second image of the frame. So that will show when he is down. Now let's run it and see if that fixed things. So I'll shoot this guy. And there. Okay, so see his legs are down now. They're not sticking up in the air. So it looks like he has fallen down. And he's yellow. Okay, so that fixes all of that. So right now, the only issue we have is that when we shoot our enemy from the left, he flies at us to the right. And that's actually a little bit difficult to fix. So I'm going to simply say, if you can do it, I'll give you some extra credit. I'm not going to help you with this. You can help each other, that's fine, but I am not going to help you with this. So if you want to fix your enemy so that, let's look when that happens. I shoot him from the left, he should fly to the left, not fly to the right. Okay, so if you can fix that, you let me know and I'll give you some extra credit. But make sure that you remember to tell me or you won't get that extra credit. Okay, and you have to tell me when I have my notebook and I'm writing down things, otherwise I won't remember. The last thing we're going to do here is to make our enemies move from the start. So we're going to our enemies, create event, and we're going to change our HSP to 3. Now that's going to make him move 3. We also want to go into our step event, not our begin step, but our regular step event, and go to the horizontal collision, in the horizontal collision, and we're going to change HSP from 0 to the opposite of HSP. So we're just changing it to its opposite. So if we run into a wall going to the right, so HSP is positive, we'll change HSP to negative so that he'll just go to the left. And if we run into a wall from the left, we'll change it to that negative HSP to its opposite, which will be positive, and we'll go back and forth between walls. So let's make sure that this works. Always code a little, test a little. Never assume that things work. Okay, so there's my enemy, and he's walking back and forth between the walls. Those three over there are caught. Notice he's also walking behind me. Now, it is important that he's walking behind me. You should know why he's walking behind me. At this point, I'm not going to remind you, but you should know why the enemy is walking behind me. That's as far as we're going to go on this check. When I come around, I'm going to ask you why the enemy is walking behind, and you should be able to tell me that. Raise your hand. Let me know you're here so that I can come and do your check for part 4.